My name is Dominique. I'm from Environment Education Victoria. We work with teachers all over Victoria on sustainability and environmental science. I love working with schools and hearing about all the different ways sustainability is included in what they do. This 15-minute session is designed to introduce you to a simple definition of climate change, explore some local sources of data on greenhouse gas emissions at a Victorian state and local government level, highlight the regional impacts of a changing climate, share some innovations in Victoria that aim to reduce CO2 emissions, and prompt you to think about the local impacts of a changing climate in your community and school. If you have any questions, please enter them into the Q&A box, and we will try and answer them at the end of the session. There are lots of really interesting data sets available to the public, but they're often inside dense reports or can be hard to find. This session has extracted some of this interesting local information. So what is climate change? Climate change is any change in the climate lasting for several decades or longer, including changes in temperature, rainfall, or wind patterns. It's different from the day-to-day change of weather. Science shows us that our climate is changing. It is getting hotter. Long-term monitoring of air and ocean temperature clearly shows that global temperatures are rising. Yes, this has happened for as long as the planet has existed, but never before on the rapid scale we're experiencing it now. So what causes climate change? In short, excessive amounts of greenhouse gases entering the atmosphere as a result of human activity is the primary cause of climate change. It helps if we understand the greenhouse effect. The gases in the atmosphere, the principal ones being water vapour, carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide and ozone, help to trap and reflect the radiation from the sun to the earth. This process of absorbing and reflecting radiation and releasing some to space allows us to have the comfortable, livable atmosphere that we do. You might imagine the atmosphere like a blanket, where some of the heat we generate is trapped next to our bodies and some is released through the material, making us comfortable and cosy in bed. The issue with climate change is that we're releasing more gases than the usual planetary processes are able to regulate, and we're putting more greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, making it more reflective so that more heat is being trapped near the Earth. This is like stuffing your doona with more and more filling. Less heat gets released, making you hotter and hotter. The industrial processes on our planet, extracting and burning coal, oil and gas, industrial-scale agriculture, clearing forests and increasing waste to landfill, all release huge amounts of carbon dioxide and methane into the atmosphere, increasing the amount of heat trapped near the Earth. In Victoria, the state government is measuring and working to improve the amount of CO2 and CO2 equivalent emissions. This table comes from the Victorian Greenhouse Gas Emission Report. It shows the breakdown of Victoria's CO2 emissions. This report is updated yearly, with the data 2 years behind the calendar year. Emissions are shown here in millions of tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalent. Carbon dioxide equivalent, expressed here as CO2e, means that other greenhouse gases are converted using their global warming potential to be expressed as carbon dioxide. This makes it much simpler to express the data on greenhouse gases in one graph rather than multiple graphs. The two largest contributing sectors to Victoria's emissions are electricity generation and transport. Together, they make up 72% of our emissions as a state. The way we power our industry and homes, the way we move around, and the way we move goods is having a big impact on our climate future. 50.9% of emissions come from the generation of electricity. 75% of that electricity comes from burning brown coal. The remaining 25% is a mix of gas, hydro, wind, small and large-scale solar. At 20.6%, transport emissions are the second largest sector. Nearly 90% of these emissions are related to the movement of people and goods on our roads. 50% is cars, 22% is heavy-duty trucks, and 16.6% is light commercial trucks. So what does this mean for your community and your students? How do and can people move around? Where does food come from? How do products enter and exit the area? What might happen in the future? We can also have a look at these emissions at a council level as well. Let's have a look at two examples from the Snapshot Climate website. Here are Melbourne and Mildura. This data provides the opportunity for some really interesting observations and conversations. By looking at the local data, you could start to connect in information like community size, resources, and types of industry. You can think about what life is like in the two different areas. This data becomes an opportunity for developing innovations that will reduce CO2 equivalent emissions in a way that is informed by the features of the region. So what does this data look like for your community? What areas would be interesting comparisons for your community? What could you focus on when talking about reducing CO2 equivalent emissions in your area? So what impact is climate change having on our state? The changing climate is affecting the whole planet. Rising sea levels, increasing rainfall intensity, increasing drought, increasing extreme temperatures and heat waves. Some of these we'll experience directly where we live and some we will not. As a state, we can expect increased average temperatures, a reduction in frost, more frequent and intense rain, high fire risk and longer fire seasons, warmer and more acidic oceans, more hot days and heat waves, changes in rainfall over the seasons, rising sea levels and increases in extreme sea level events. The Victorian Government website, climatechange.vic.gov.au, has information for each region that outlines what the greatest risks are as the climate changes. To find the information specific to your region, you can visit the website. Local councils and organisations are also valuable resources to understanding climate risks, adaptation and resilience. Visiting your local council website and searching for climate change, climate adaptation, or climate innovation can help you to find out information about what is happening locally. And if that doesn't get you anywhere, you can always find out who your local councillor is and get in touch to ask them what is going on locally to help the community reduce CO2 equivalent emissions and innovate as the climate changes. So it's great to have all this data that tells us about what is happening around the state and in our communities, but it's not enough to just know that this data exists, especially in our work with students. Just like we collect data to inform our teaching, this data can be used to inform actions to reduce greenhouse gases. It's important in exploring climate change with students to highlight that there are solutions for reducing CO2 equivalent emissions. We can still innovate and do more, but there are projects ready to go that will help improve our climate future. Project Drawdown is a great resource that brings together research from across the planet and highlights the impactful solutions. These solutions don't require us to invent anything new, they are actions that can be taken today. There are over 80 solutions listed here that will reduce CO2 equivalent emissions and increase capture and storage of carbon. The rankings of the solutions are based on projected global emissions. But the importance of each solution will differ significantly depending on the context and geographic, ecological, economic, political and social conditions. This set of actions can be explored in partnership with your local data in mind. What projects could be enacted in your area? What are things that can be done in the school or in the community? And in addition to the top 80 global solutions, there are some great professional learning resources, including free access to the annual Drawdown Learn conference. There are some world-first projects happening right here in Victoria that are addressing CO2 equivalent emissions directly. In Gippsland, Soil Key Renovator is a new cultivator that builds topsoil, improves soil health and function, enhances plant growth and biodiversity for all soil-based agriculture, and provides greater efficiency in water and land utilisation. The process is so effective at capturing and sequestering carbon in the soil, it can earn carbon credits. And the carbon-rich soil is a fertile soil that is beneficial to the crops grown in as well. Another innovation is in the wine research industry. The grape and wine sector are being supported to reduce CO2 equivalent emissions and participate in carbon storage. One innovative practice is grazing sheep in vineyards to reduce the need for mechanical and chemical weed removal. This reduces the vineyard's CO2 equivalent emissions and costs. A winery on the Bellarine Peninsula has baby doll sheep that take care of the weeds but aren't tall enough to reach the grapes. So now what? There are many useful local resources that can help us understand climate change. We have access to data about state and regional emissions. We know the impacts of a changing climate will be different in different parts of the state. And there are interesting and important local projects that are striving to do things that will benefit all of us. There are lots of resources available to educators online that help explore climate change in schools. Two to highlight are With One Planet, a climate change curriculum, suitable for students from Year 1 to Year 10, and 2040. If you haven't seen this yet, it is a must for a positive view on the things we can do to secure our climate future. The film also has accompanying teacher resources. This 15-minute session is just part of the professional development offerings from Environment Education Victoria. Have a look at the resource list that accompanies this session for all the links mentioned in the presentation. Share this session with your colleagues, or get in touch with Eve if you'd like to know more about our professional development offerings.